And a good Thursday morning to you. Welcome into the Nick Craig Show, streaming live this morning on YouTube, Rumble, and X. Don't forget that you can take the show with you 24/7 on demand by checking out the Nick Craig Show in your favorite podcast app. You can also listen online by visiting the website nickcraig.com. Our show this morning is brought to you in part by the Law Group. Visit them online at lawgroupnc.com or give them a call at 910-251-6088. More from them coming up a little bit later on this morning. As we come on the air live on this Thursday morning, July the 3rd, debate does continue in the United States House of Representatives. Debate started shortly before 5 o'clock this morning as President Trump, House Speaker Mike Johnson, Senate Leader John Thune are practically just moments away from delivering on President Trump's promise to have the big, beautiful bill signed into law before July the 4th. After a very lengthy day yesterday in the United States House, back-to-back votes for a combined 14 hours as Speaker Mike Johnson and his leadership team, alongside Trump and other folks in the administration, tried to get all GOP holdouts on board, and it would appear after a procedural vote last night that has officially happened. Those lawmakers are all on board after apparently a midnight session around 3:20 this morning after holding the vote open for nearly 6 hours. While Johnson lobbied some of those holdouts, several hardline conservatives voted to move forward with the measure. Those holdouts included Representative John Beecham out of Oklahoma, Eric Burleson out of Missouri, Keith Self out of Texas, Scott Perry out of Pennsylvania, Andy Harris out of Maryland, Chip Roy out of Texas, and Bob Onner out of Missouri. Only one Republican voting no to move forward with it. That was Representative Brian Fitzpatrick out of Pennsylvania. Shortly before 5 o'clock, a debate did start on the floor of the United States House, and shortly, right around 5 o'clock or so, House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries took position on the House floor. He has been speaking now for nearly 2 hours, a little over 2 hours now, as the debate on this bill continues. House Speaker Mike Johnson reporting overnight that vote could come as soon as 8 o'clock this morning. So we are, of course, keeping a very close eye live on the House floor this morning on the Nick Craig Show. We will dip into some of that coverage as it right before we came on. Hakeem Jeffries is going over some stories that he has curated, I guess is the most accurate term to describe it, some curated stories from members of the United States as Democrats continue to claim that Medicaid and that SNAP and all of these other programs are set to just go away under this Trump-backed bill. We'll continue to dip into that coverage throughout the morning right here on the Nick Craig Show. There was a pretty big decision last week from the United States Supreme Court as it dealt with an executive order from President Donald Trump around birthright citizenship. And while that decision in itself is rather interesting, the Supreme Court justices opined on a big struggle that the president's been dealing with over the last 6 months or so. And these are district court judges essentially striking down his executive orders. To get some details on that this morning, it's my pleasure to welcome North Carolina attorney Seth Woodall to the Nick Craig Show this morning. Seth, appreciate the time. I'm sure, like you, many other folks have read some of the frustrations from the president. Seemingly every EO he signs, some liberal Democrat judge decides that they're going to strike it down. What do you make of this Supreme Court opinion from last week and maybe some of those restraints on these district court judges?
So I think it was a monumental decision by the Supreme Court last week, and I think it certainly played in favor of President Trump. What we've seen over the last 24, 36, even 48 months is complete lawfare against President Trump. And these attorneys from the liberal side, the Democratic attorneys, are filing lawsuits, and they're handpicking judges in judicial districts. And these are district court judges at the federal level who are just entering blanket injunctions that are stopping President Trump from carrying out his executive orders. And so I think it's just a continuation of the lawfare that we've seen against President Trump over the last couple of years. And I think it was a huge win for President Trump, because what it's done is it's basically said these district court judges do not have blanket authority to enter nationwide injunctions. And so, I think it's a big win.
Yeah, and like let's take a step back on all of this. This idea that some leftist judge out of Washington state can determine immigration policy coming out of an executive order from the White House. I mean, Seth, you don't have to be an attorney to look at that by face value and say this is absurd that a relatively small geographical area judge is deciding immigration policy for the entire continental United States.
Oh, sure. And what's happening again is the attorneys that are filing these actions on behalf of the plaintiffs are doing so in areas and in jurisdictions where they know that they're going to get the relief that they're asking for. And so a lot of these cases are coming out of the same states, Washington State, New York, and they know that they can present these injunctions to a district court judge at the federal level, and they're going to sign off saying that these executive orders cannot be carried out anywhere in the 50 states. So again, they are handpicking these judges. They know they're going to get the results they want, and then Trump is left, or the Department of Justice is left, trying to undo what's been done at the district court level, and it gums up the system. And so they've done this unilaterally. These judges are making these decisions just to stop Trump. That's bottom line what's happening.
Seth, you're a licensed attorney here in North Carolina. You're in and out of courtrooms, 5 days a week here across the state. When you look at regular, normal, everyday people living their lives, law-abiding citizens, they see that the judicial system at so many different levels has been weaponized against people like President Donald Trump. You think that erodes the public trust in the judicial system, regardless of what the situation that they might be facing is?
I think it should. I mean, so if you look at what's happened at the national level, so you see that liberal judges who are handpicked and appointed by the United States president at the time of the appointment are carrying out basically partisan politics is all this is. So I think there is an erosion of faith in our communities, in our states, based upon what these federal judges are doing, because they're doing this solely upon partisan lines, not based upon statutory interpretation or case law or precedents. They're just entering injunctions to stop our president. And again, the judiciary has been used against him as a weapon for at least 4 years. I think looking back at these nationwide injunctions, since 1963, there's been less than 150 nationwide injunctions granted since 1963. In the last 4 years, during Trump's 4-year term, and then currently, there's been probably 40 or 50 against Trump. So 1/3 of those national injunctions have been entered against President Trump. And so you can see the writing is on the wall. They're doing this as a weapon against President Trump.
Well, and you mentioned this, essentially court shopping this in front of some of these more favorable judges in predominantly blue areas across the country. Seth, is there a way to walk this back? Obviously, the decision from the Supreme Court last Friday is a big win for the president, but is there any way to walk this back, maybe ratchet down some of this national pressure and attention that goes to all of these cases and get back to allowing the executive to do their job regardless of their political party?
Well, I think it's just going to take some additional court actions at the United States Supreme Court level. And a lot of these cases, this case hinges upon birthright citizenship, which is yet to be heard. But we're just going to have to continue to fight these cases through the system. Right now, fortunately for us as conservatives, we have a pretty good split on the United States Supreme Court. So over the next couple of years, I think we're going to continue to see conservative rules or rulings and judgments coming out of the United States Supreme Court. But I think that's the only way we're going to be able to ratchet it down and try to get a hold of it, because these judges are using the provisions of the Judiciary Act from 1798. So I mean, we're talking about law that is hundreds of years old, and it's going to take some time to try to correct that. But I think we're in a good position as conservatives to see that happen.
Well, and I'm glad you bring up the timetable on all of this. The president is only in the Oval Office for 4 years. He began his term back in January. Seth, some of these cases, as you watch them unfold in the federal court system and then potentially be taken by the United States Supreme Court, those can take years to play out. I guess the president's just supposed to sit back and relax and crack open a couple of Diet Cokes while this process unfolds, and his presidency might be over by the time some of these things are decided. It's absurd.
Well, it is absurd. And I think that's 100% the hope of the Democrats and the hope of the liberal attorneys that are filing these actions. They know that if they can wait President Trump out long enough, he only has 3.5 years left. And they know if they wait long enough, then he's going to be out of office, and certainly somebody else is going to be in office. And I think that goes to part of the reason this birthright immigration or citizenship case is so big, is because what we're seeing is that liberals want illegal immigrants here in the United States. And if you can come over here illegally and have a child, then all of a sudden you've got an anchor baby and you have some claim. And the liberals are trying to create entire voting blocks that they know are going to vote for Democrats, and they're going to try to control the elections for the next, decades to come, honestly. So if they can hold out long enough, I think that is their hope. But now what we have seen, historically, it takes quite some time for a lot of these cases to come up on appeal and make it to the United States Supreme Court level. Since Trump has been in office, we've seen the United States Supreme Court take up several matters in a very prompt manner as opposed to what we've seen historically. So I think, again, going back to, we have a very good split of conservative judges at the United States Supreme Court level, and hopefully we'll be able to expedite a lot of these hearings so that we can get the relief that we need during Trump's administration, because he's done more in the last 6 months than I would say any president has done in the last 20 years.
Yeah, it's hard to argue that point. I'm trying to remember back just a couple of months ago when we first started seeing these nationwide injunctions coming out of these unelected district courts across the country. Seth, there was this thought and thing that played out on TV and on social media that the judicial system could essentially defund these district courts. They're not enshrined in the United States Constitution as a mandated court system. I'm sure you tracked that back a couple of months ago. Would you opine on that for us this morning?
Yeah, I think that's possible. We've not seen that happen yet, but if you cut the funds off, that's going to cut off the ability to continue to weaponize the Department of Justice or the federal court system against Trump and others. So I think that's possible, but it's all going to come down to following the money.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's turn to another big political story this week here in North Carolina. U.S. Senator Thom Tillis announcing that he is not running for re-election. North Carolina is a very interesting political state. All eyes are going to be here in the midterm elections coming up next year. Give us a broad overview of that situation from your vantage point this morning.
So, we've been watching this issue with Thom Tillis for a number of years, and Thom Tillis has been an unpopular conservative leader, and I wouldn't even call him a leader, but an unpopular conservative politician. And I would even submit to you that he's a rhino. He's Republican in name only. He has supported red flag laws for firearms. He's supported gay marriage. He supported or not supported Trump's initiatives with the wall and used military funds for that. So he's not been supportive of President Trump leading up to where we're at now. So it's no surprise that he's going to retire. We knew for a fact, as the Conservative Party here in North Carolina, that he was going to be primaried next year by a very strong primary opponent. We don't know who that would be, but we saw it coming, and he knew it was coming. So it's not a surprise. He's done a lot. He's criticized President Trump most recently last week, and that's what led to all of the social media posts by President Trump. And he just came right out and said that he's going to handpick somebody for that seat. Obviously the heir to the throne per se would be Laura Trump, and Trump has made it clear over the last couple of days that he would support her if in fact she would do this. Now, she looked at some seats up here a couple of years ago, but had made a decision not to run due to the ages of her children. But I think she has right of first refusal for that seat, and we'll have to see who else throws her name in. But she certainly would be almost impossible for any Republican candidate in the state to beat in a primary. So I think everybody's going to watch and just see what she does.
Obviously, a very fluid situation. We'll keep our eyes on that. But the elephant in the room here, Seth, is our former governor and Roy Cooper. He's up teaching at Harvard right now. Contrary to what many conservatives feel or believe about Roy Cooper, he did a really good job throughout his 8 years in the governor's mansion as portraying himself as a moderate, regardless of all the legislation he vetoed and all of these crazy left-wing ideas he wanted to push. He is a very popular figure here in North Carolina. It's going to be an uphill battle if he decides to get into that race for Republicans.
Well, I agree. He's going to be a political monster to try to beat. And if you look at what his policies and the implementation of his orders over the last 8 years, he's way radical, way more radical than he appears in person. And he's done a good job of creating a persona that he's just a nice, nice moderate man. And he's been able to cross over the party lines and get votes in the general election. So he's certainly going to be tough for anybody to beat. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, we'll keep an eye and see. His camp continues to state they'll make a decision in the next couple of weeks, and watching some of the commentary from members of Congress and other folks across the state. Seth, where can folks keep up to date with you and find out some more information?
So website, Seth M. Woodall and Associates. We're also on Facebook, on X and Twitter, Seth Woodall for NC. Check us out. It's what we do.
Seth Woodall, appreciate the time this morning. Thanks for joining me on the Nick Craig Show.
Thanks, Nick.
Great catching up with Seth this morning and going through, obviously, that big decision almost 1 week ago, last Friday, from the United States Supreme Court, essentially, in some regards, striking down some of these decisions by these wacko leftist activist judges trying to essentially upend the Trump administration and all of their executive orders. It is a very interesting story. We'll, of course, keep an eye on those details and look forward to continuing the conversation with Seth Woodall right here on the Nick Craig Show. Again, looking live this morning, debate continues on the floor of the United States House as we are potentially moments away from a full vote on Trump's one big beautiful bill. Hakeem Jeffries has been on the House floor for going over about 2.5 hours now debating this legislation. Let's dip into this audio for a second and hear what the House Minority Leader is saying right now on the House floor.
In history, we will never let anyone erase it. We need to learn from it, not erase it. And we will never let that happen. History teaches us that what leadership actually does is set us on a course toward a more perfect union. And leaders have recognized that part of doing that is to make sure we are there for everyday Americans who would otherwise find themselves in an incredibly vulnerable situation. President Franklin D. Roosevelt.
All right, we're going to have to spare me the history lesson here from Hakeem Jeffries. It's very clear and obvious as to what he is doing. He even made the comments earlier this morning, just after 6 o'clock, as to what his intentions are as he continues the debate on the House floor. Here's Hakeem Jeffries about an hour or so ago.
I feel the obligation, Mr. Speaker, to stand on this House floor and take my sweet time to tell the stories of the American people. And that's exactly what I intend to do. Take my sweet time on behalf of the American people, on behalf of their health care, on behalf of their Medicaid, on behalf of their nutritional assistance, on behalf of veterans, on behalf of farmers, on behalf of children, on behalf of seniors, on behalf of people with disabilities, on behalf of small businesses, on behalf of every single American. I'm on this House floor after 6 a.m. and I'm planning to take my sweet time.
Woo! Oh, yeah. Nothing more than a little grandstanding, literally saying exactly what he's going to do. He's currently flipping through a binder of emails, social media comments, letters, not exactly sure where all of this was curated from, reading stories about individuals. And of course, in the typical Democrat form, the things that he's claiming are just not accurate. I mean, he's making the point that people with disabilities are going to get kicked off of Medicaid. It's just not true. I mean, nothing of what the Democrats are saying yesterday. You'll love this. I don't have any of the clips, but for the better part of 2.5 hours, all 200 plus members of the Democrat caucus in the House of Representatives walked up to the microphone, attempted to make a procedural vote, were told by the speaker that it was not allowed, and they did that one after another for the better part of 2.5 hours. And ladies and gentlemen, I'll contend to you this morning that this is exactly what's going on with the Democrats right now. They don't have any solutions. You know, what I don't hear from Hakeem Jeffries, I've had the pleasure of listening to him since about 4:45 this morning on and off as I was doing the Carolina Journal show over at WBT, dipping in and listening to what he's saying. There's no ideas. The Democrats don't have solutions to any of these so-called problems that they're talking about. They want to claim, and yesterday heard speeches from a variety of members on the Democrat side of the aisle talking about how they're trying to make America more affordable. They're trying to help the middle class. And I'm sitting here yesterday afternoon working, and I'm just thinking to myself, does anybody believe this bullshit that they're peddling? I'm supposed to believe that the Democrat Party, who was just in power for 4 years, cares about middle-class working Americans? With the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act, which spiked federal spending and gave a bunch of handouts to green energy companies so that they can produce and import Chinese-made solar panels to put on your electrical grid, that's helping middle-class Americans? While Democrats sat idly for the better part of 4 years when tens of millions of individuals came into the United States illegally across our U.S.-Mexico border, killing individuals like Lake and Riley in Georgia, killing individuals throughout the United States, gaming the federal system, being in the country illegally, and I'm supposed to believe and I'm supposed to understand that the Democrat Party is the one fighting for middle-class Americans? When inflation was at 9.5% during Joe Biden's term, and Democrats sat idly in Congress and decided to pass a piece of legislation that did not cut government spending, but increased it, I'm supposed to believe that they care about middle-class Americans? It is the quintessential definition of gaslighting. It is the quintessential definition of Democrats claiming that they want to help middle-class Americans. But unfortunately for them, we have relatively recent history, just in the last 2 or 3 years, of Democrats actively working against the American people. And the only example you need is the immigration issue. Just that. You don't need anything else. There's plenty of other examples, but just look at immigration. Tell me how importing tens of millions of people into the United States illegally helps the middle class. Just give me an example of how that makes middle class Americans more whole. How that helps middle-class Americans, as Democrats have been bitching and complaining about for the last 3 days, put food on their table, helps them with their health care. So when you've got 15 million people in the United States, they show up to hospitals without insurance, but hospitals are not allowed to turn people away. How does that help me with my health care? When schools are being overrun by individuals that are not legally in the country, their children, that these individuals are not paying taxes, yet they're taking advantage of the public school system. Tell me how that helps middle-class Americans. I mean, I'm going to need some description as to how this helps people, as you are claiming that you want to do. See, the Democrat Party has lost the middle class. It started back in 2015 with the rise of Donald Trump. And as we look at it now, this is a party that has continually struggled to deal with winning over the middle class. A party that has struggled to convince middle-class American voters that they are the party that has the best ideas going forward. They are desperately trying to win that back. They are desperately trying to win back those voters, and they're very unsuccessful in doing so. Here's more from Hakeem Jeffries earlier this morning on the House floor as he describes Trump's big, beautiful bill and all of the terrible things that will happen as a result.
In addition to the cuts to Medicaid, this bill will result in the largest cut to Medicare in American history. By some estimates, more than $500 billion in cuts to Medicare as a result of the Republicans' one big, ugly bill. This bill will also result in a devastating blow to the Affordable Care Act. That's no surprise because since 2010, Republicans, Mr. Speaker, have been trying to gut and destroy the Affordable Care Act. And as a result of the damage that is done to the Affordable Care Act in this legislation, millions of Americans will lose their health care. The assault on health care in this one big ugly bill will result in more than 17 million Americans losing health care in the United States of America. Shame on the people who've decided to launch that kind of all-out assault on the health and the well-being of everyday Americans. That's not what we should be doing here in the United States House of Representatives. And because of the drastic cuts that are made to health care in this one big ugly bill, people with private insurance all across America are going to experience increases in their premiums, their copays, and their deductibles. Millions of Americans in every corner of this country, an all-out assault on health care. That's a very different vision, Mr. Speaker, that Republicans have, working hard to take health care away from the American people than our vision, because we believe, as Democrats, that in the United States of America, health care should not simply be a privilege. Health care is a right that should be available to every single person in the United States of America.
Now, I'm going to stop Hakeem Jeffries there for a second. As somebody that went through the process of purchasing health care on the open marketplace this year, as many of you are well aware, I was fired almost a year ago from the radio station here in Wilmington and had to go through the process of the open healthcare exchange, healthcare.gov, Obamacare. It's a freaking disaster. The insurance is so freaking expensive, and the coverage is so terrible. I almost decided not to even bother with health insurance because the process that Democrats are claiming is so good. The process that they claim is necessary for everybody. It just doesn't work. A great comment on our Rumble this morning. I love how married to healthcare they are. Healthcare and the health of America is the worst it's ever been. 100% accurate. 100% accurate. But Democrats continue to talk about how every 17 million people, $500 billion worth of insurance is going to go away. These numbers just seem to constantly be multiplying. I don't know where any of this stuff is based in fact. Now, the House Majority Whip in Steve Scalise clapped back on a little bit of this, specifically dealing with Medicaid and the expansion of Medicaid and the lack of a work requirement. This is how Steve Scalise, the Republican whip, described it early this morning. This was around 4:45 this morning.
Before. If you're disabled on Medicaid right now, you've been crowded out of those programs by people turning down work. Able-bodied people, 35-year-olds sitting at home playing video games. They're going to now have to go get a job. That's right. And by the way, that's a good thing for them. Their mom doesn't want them sitting in the basement playing video games anyway. But now it no longer will be crowding out Medicaid for the truly needy people who deserve it. Before.
And that's exactly the point, and it's a solid point there by Steve Scalise. With Medicaid expansion and without a work requirement, you have got able-bodied individuals, and as Steve Scalise describes it, able-bodied individuals that don't make any money, that are able to sit on a government-funded and government-sponsored healthcare system crowding out the individuals that Hakeem Jeffries is acting like he cares so much about. Right? He makes the point, Jeffries makes the point that all of these people are going to lose their health insurance. All of these doctors are just going to go away, which I don't think there's any truth in that at all. But he has nothing to say about the individuals that are capable of working, choose not to, and are able to get free medical coverage paid for by the federal government. No discussion of that. You can't get into your doctor for 6 months because a bunch of individuals who are able-bodied, we're not talking about people that are disabled and unable to work. We are talking about able-bodied individuals that have no interest in working, zero, that are able to collect free health care. Tell me how that is good for middle-class Americans who are paying for that insurance, I'll mind you, because as it stands right now, at least with Medicaid expansion in North Carolina, it is a 90-10 federal split, meaning the federal government, aka you and I, pick up 90% of the tab, and the state, also aka you and I, pick up the remaining 10%. Again, we're not talking about elderly individuals. We're not talking about those with disabilities. We're not talking about those that have health ailments that make it so that they can't hold or work a job. We are talking about, as Steve Scalise noted, able-bodied 35-year-old men that do nothing all day, but are still able to collect free insurance from the federal government. Tell me how that helps middle-class Americans. Tell me how that helps my cost of living. Tell me how that helps deal with my medical insurance. The answer is you can't, because it doesn't. Under no circumstances is that helpful to the so-called middle-class Americans that Hakeem Jeffries and Democrats claim that they care so much about. That Hakeem Jeffries and the Democrats constantly make the point that these are the only individuals, or these are the individuals that we care so much about, and we are doing our damnedest to help. How about the tax increase that's going to come forward? Nearly on average, a 67% tax increase that will come forward if this legislation doesn't pass. Does that help middle-class Americans, Hakeem? Does that help the poor and disabled that you're talking about? With an average of a 67% increase in their taxes? I don't think so. This is the problem that the Democrats face right now. They are a rudderless party that has no idea as to where they're going and seemingly has no concept of where to go. But they're just running in the ocean. That's it. There's no direction. Trump has completely overloaded them with so many issues since day one that they just have nothing to do. So they grandstand, which is what you literally just heard from the House Minority Leader. They stand on the House floor and grandstand, as Hakeem Jeffries says, he's going to take his sweet time reading through all of these letters. Why don't they propose something better? I mean, there's this concept, there's this idea that Republicans are ruling with an iron fist in Congress. If Democrats have better ideas, bring them forward and push them to the American people. But as I have spent probably over the last 2 days, like 15 hours, maybe even more, 20 hours, watching the Senate, the House, and now the House again this morning, I haven't heard any better ideas from the Democrats. All I've heard is that Republicans are trying to kick disabled people and poor people off of Medicaid and SNAP. That's all I've heard, which of course is not accurate. But what's your solution? If this is so bad, you should have some sort of alternative decision, right? You should have some sort of alternative bill, some sort of different viewpoint that you can propose to the American people. But as I watched all 200 members of the House delegation walk up to the microphone yesterday and try to do a procedural motion to be blocked by the Speaker of the House, I didn't hear any of those ideas. I heard a bunch of grandstanding from liberals that, by the way, aren't in power. Your guys' ideas suck. The American people overwhelmingly rejected the Democrat Party in November of last year. They do not believe that the Democrat Party has the solutions and priorities moving forward for them. That is why they not only voted for Donald Trump, but they gave Republicans majorities in the Senate and in the House, because the Democrats' ideas are garbage. The Democrats do not have suitable solutions that fit the American people. Like, allowing 15 or 25 million people to come into the country illegally. Like allowing inflation to run at 9.5% in the middle of the Joe Biden administration. Those ideas don't work for the American people. So they rejected your policies, they rejected your ideas, and they gave Republicans control. The reality is you guys lost. The reality is you were unable to convince the American people that you had good ideas, that you had sustainable platforms and policies to make their lives better. And so now the Republicans are in charge. We have no obligation to work with you. I heard numerous times yesterday, Republicans need to come back to the chamber and negotiate with us. No, we don't. We have absolutely no obligation to negotiate with you at all. We're in charge. You're not. The president is setting the narrative. The president is setting the agenda. Mike Johnson and John Thune are the ones in charge, not Hakeem Jeffries and not Chuck Schumer. If you care so much about being in charge, if you care so much about the American people, maybe you should have run a better presidential candidate. Maybe you should have allowed an actual primary to take place so that voters could decide who they wanted their candidate to be. But you chose not to do any of that. You chose it was more important to grandstand, to essentially crown a candidate without having a primary, and now you're dismayed that you're not in power. Now you're dismayed that the Republicans aren't coming to the table to negotiate with you. The reality is we don't need you. So as Hakeem Jeffries states, he's going to grandstand on this. He is going to stand on the floor and slowly go through all of these letters, slowly go through all of these issues on the House floor. Go for it. Delay the inevitable, Hakeem. Republicans have the vote. A 2:00 meeting this morning between Donald Trump, Mike Johnson, and Republican holdouts have secured this vote for Trump. And we are expecting that vote to happen as soon as like 8 o'clock this morning. So we're gonna stay on the air with you and watch this unfold live. Hakeem Jeffries now going on close to 3 hours speaking on the House floor, again, ahead of this vote for the big, beautiful bill. We'll keep our eyes on those details. Before that, I do want to tell you about the law group here in Wilmington. When legal challenges arise, make sure you put your trust in the law group. Since 2003, their experienced attorneys have provided high-quality, affordable legal services across Eastern North Carolina. Whether you're facing a divorce, navigating real estate transactions, or maybe you're in a position where you need a strong defense, the law group has your back. Their dedicated team ensures your questions are answered and issues are resolved promptly. Great news, ladies and gentlemen. They are located in downtown Wilmington and just a quick phone call away at 910-251-6088, or you can visit their website, lawgroupnc.com. That's 910-251-6088, or online at lawgroupnc.com. The Law Group, experience and dedication you can rely on. I used the Law Group actually almost 5 years ago this month. When I went through the process of purchasing my home here in New Hanover County. Phenomenal experience, great group over there at the Law Group. Visit them online or give them a call. We will continue and head right back to the House floor as the Nick Craig Show rolls on live this morning on YouTube, Rumble, and X, and 24/7, wherever you get your podcasts. And a good Thursday morning to you, July the 3rd, a busy morning here on the Nick Craig Show. Thanks for spending some time with us. Don't forget that you can keep up to date with the show, get daily show notes and more by visiting patreon.com/Nick Craig. You can support the show financially and get access to some of that additional content. All of that available over at patreon.com/Nick Craig. As we come on the air with you this morning, debate does continue in the United States House, coming up here on 7:45 Eastern, as Hakeem Jeffries has been on the House floor for going on 3 hours now, as he claimed he is going to slowly walk through this process ahead of an expected vote, and that vote is expected to be one to concur with the United States Senate's changes to Trump's one big beautiful bill, according to details in the overnight hours around 3:20 a.m. after holding the vote open for nearly 6 hours. While House Speaker Mike Johnson and President Donald Trump lobbied some severe hardliners and GOP holdouts, the vote to move forward with the measure ended with the vote passing and those lawmakers seemingly coming on board. With that, the various members of the House Freedom Caucus and other folks continuing to discuss this legislation and the implications of it. But when this vote happens, which it could be happening coming up soon, very soon right here, the House is on the cusp of passing this, and it would be a massive victory, not only for President Donald Trump, but a big one for House Speaker Mike Johnson and the leader of the United States Senate in John Thune, House Majority Leader Steve Scalise, and others continuing to work on getting this done and getting this bill on the president's desk by July the 4th, as that deadline is rapidly approaching. It would appear that those hardliners have either been offered something, some concessions have been made to move forward with this legislation. Well, let's dip back into the House floor live this morning and see what Hakeem Jeffries is up to and some of the things that he is continuing to talk about as he, quote, slowly goes through this process, taking his time on the House floor.
Pass it. And I am so glad that Amy Farrand is here to see it finally passed and signed, one of the first authors. There are more than 18 million Americans over the age of 65. Most of them have low incomes. Most of them are threatened by illness and medical expenses that they cannot afford. And through this new law, Mr. President, every citizen will be able, in his productive years, when he is earning, to insure himself against the ravages of illness in his old age. President Johnson was referring to President Harry Truman, who was there at the signing ceremony, having recognized President Truman's vision. He says, and through this new law, Mr. President, every citizen will be able, in his productive years, when he is earning, to insure himself against the ravages of illness in his old age. That was the beauty of Medicare.
So we're getting a little bit of a history lesson from the House Minority Leader this morning, Hakeem Jeffries, as he's talking about Harry Truman and I guess the original passage of Medicaid, as he continues to stall out this process on the House floor. Now, procedurally, he was given, both parties were given a minute to speak. Hakeem Jeffries is now going on almost 3 hours. I presume that House Republicans are making sure that all of their I's are dotted, all of their T's are crossed, as they are, presumably at any point here, could call the question on this vote. It does sound like, at least from some of the background noise that you could hear there when we were listening to the House, listening live on the House floor, that more individuals are now making their way into the chamber. And as soon as all of them are there, which could happen as soon as around 8 o'clock or so, you would expect a quick vote on this legislation. Obviously, all of the Democrats will vote against it. Seemingly all of the Republicans will vote for it. And with that, it should essentially be said and done. And so let's just take a kind of a couple of steps back and look at the big, beautiful bill. That's, of course, what's being discussed, the one big, beautiful bill this morning. Is it the perfect piece of legislation? No. I mean, it's over 940 pages. So inherently in that, is it the perfect piece of legislation? No. Was it ever going to be the perfect bill, the utopian bill? No. Could there be things that are changed? Yes. I mean, yesterday morning, we spent some time talking about the Senate's changes on some of these green energy tax credits. I think that's a big swing and a miss from the United States Senate. But what you've got now is the Republican Party a Republican Party that is in the majority, not only in the Oval Office, but also, of course, in the White House, that is trying to get through some of their policy agendas and some of their policy platforms in this legislation. And I am very curious and would love to know what some of those conversations look like in the overnight hours today for House Speaker Mike Johnson. I'm not sure that he has slept in probably the better part of 48 hours as this process has continued to unfold. And I'm very curious. And some of the concerns, we heard from Chip Roy yesterday morning right here on the Nick Craig Show, a clip of him yesterday. And with that, he brought up some of these concerns. He was concerned about the deficit spending. He was concerned about some of these green energy, solar and nuclear, or solar and wind subsidies that were continuing in the Senate version of the legislation. Those are all real concerns. I guess you'd say the good news with all of that is that Republicans can, in single individual pieces of legislation, roll back and change some of those policies later on if they choose to do so, if there's a group of individuals that is willing to do that. So those things can be changed. Again, perfect piece of legislation? No, definitely not at all. But a good piece of legislation? I'd say, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we are right now in our country looking at a position, whether you're talking about healthcare, whether you're talking about SNAP, or whether you're talking about all of these other federal programs, things that are not sustainable. And this whole idea of Medicaid expansion, which the federal government attempted to and was successful in ramming down the throats of many states over the last couple of years, this was the inevitable end of it. I mean, you don't need to be you don't have to have a PhD in economics or some sort of PhD in poli-sci to understand that long term it was not sustainable for the federal government to cover 90% of the state's increases to Medicare, or to Medicaid, excuse me, not Medicare, Medicaid. That was never sustainable. That was never going to last long term. And so I caught this letter yesterday from Governor Josh Stein. He sent a strongly worded letter to the entire North Carolina congressional delegation. And I wanted to read through at least a little bit of it this morning so that we can kind of get an idea of what is being said. The letter from Josh Stein reads as follows. Dear members of North Carolina's congressional delegation, I write today with deep concerns regarding the Senate budget reconciliation bill that would impose sweeping changes to Medicaid, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, also known as SNAP, and the tax credits for energy and manufacturing. This bill has moved at a breakneck pace, which is not true, leaving North Carolinians without ample time to provide feedback on the devastating impacts that this would have on our state. As the bill returns to the House, I urge you to press pause on this bill because of the immediate and long-term threats it poses to the health and well-being of North Carolinians and the economic stability of our state. So turning in on the first issue here, Medicaid, the governor writes, the stakes for North Carolina could not be higher. The latest estimates are that 520,000 North Carolinians will lose their insurance due to proposed changes to Medicaid. marketplace health plans, and if the marketplace subsidies expire at the end of 2025. The number of uninsured North Carolinians could increase further to sweep up more than 670,000 people who enrolled in Medicaid expansion. Without changes by Congress or the General Assembly, Medicaid now provides critical health insurance to more than 1 in 4 North Carolinians. And again, we're talking about Medicaid expansion. Individuals who have just gotten insurance through Medicaid, many of them able-bodied individuals who were just part of this eligibility change less than 2 years ago across North Carolina. The governor goes on. The Senate bill includes deep cuts to North Carolina's Medicaid program, with North Carolina set to lose $39.9 billion in Medicaid funding over the next decade. The Senate's version of House Resolution 1 targets hospital and healthcare provider funding by phasing out critical financing tools like state-directed payments and sharply reduces provider taxes. Our state healthcare association has warned this plan will result in the closure of beds, services, and numerous hospitals, particularly in rural North Carolina. When the hospital reduces services or close their doors, it's not just Medicaid recipients who suffer, but the entire community. And as I was reading this yesterday afternoon, I thought to myself, what did all of these hospitals do like 18 months ago? Right? Because before Medicaid expansion, which is, again, what we're talking about, without Medicaid expansion, what did these hospitals do? Were they all going out of business? I don't think the answer to that question is yes. The governor goes on to read that the state-directed payments allow the state to direct Medicaid payments to hospitals and providers to increase access and quality of care. North Carolina's Healthcare Access and Stabilization Program, also known as HASP, H-A-S-P, the state's largest SDP, is valued at over $6 billion annually. HASP strengthens healthcare infrastructure, particularly for safety net hospitals in rural communities, and expands access to healthcare. Under the Senate plan, SDPs would be phased out entirely. This would dismantle the North Carolina Healthcare Access and Stabilization Program and similar programs, destabilizing the healthcare landscape across the state. He then goes on to talk more about those and notes, without this funding, North Carolina cannot meet the rising costs or pay for the compliance of new federal mandates like work requirements. Ah, yes, those evil, awful, terrible work requirements. Additionally, state law currently requires Medicaid expansion to end if provider tax revenues are insufficient. The Senate proposal would take away North Carolina's ability to adjust current provider taxes or levy new provider taxes, ultimately jeopardizing Medicaid expansion and the coverage it now provides to more than 670,000 North Carolinians. And this was always the problem with Medicaid expansion. It was 100% reliant on the fact that the federal government would continue to fund it at 90%. The federal government is $36 trillion in debt. The federal government spends more than it takes in every single year. The federal government has no substantial plans to correct its spending. So when you rely solely on the federal government to make your 90% payments for Medicaid expansion, you are setting yourself up for failure. I'm sorry to say it, but it's the God's honest truth. Medicaid expansion, I don't know why the hell Republicans moved forward on it. It was a disaster from day one. And the unfortunate reality is now, because of that poor decision 2 years ago by the Republican-led General Assembly, now it's going to be the Republican-led General Assembly that is going to be responsible, quote unquote, for 670,000 people likely losing their Medicaid coverage under expansion, all because they made a really crappy deal with the federal government, one that was not sustainable and one that was a really stupid choice for the state of North Carolina. It was stupid when they did it 2 years ago, and now you're seeing the results of it play out in real time. The federal government is broke. It does not have the money to fund all of these wish list programs and all of these entitlement expansions that Democrats consistently talk about and that Democrats consistently want. It just doesn't have that kind of money. And now that change is coming. And now states like North Carolina are going to be on the hook for hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars worth of costs, which of course they do not have. They don't have it. There's no way that the state of North Carolina can make up the difference. And so it will be the Republican-led General Assembly that is going to be, quote unquote, kicking people off of their insurance. Disaster. Stupid decision from day one. And now it's unfortunately coming home and roosting. Back to Governor Stein's letter to the congressional delegation. He then starts talking about SNAP. SNAP faces equally serious threats. SNAP remains a lifeline to over 1.4 million children, older adults, veterans, people with disabilities, and working families who rely on it for basic food security. Both House and Senate versions of the bill propose shifting food benefit costs to the states, ending a 50-year bipartisan understanding that SNAP benefits are fully federally funded. Based on USDA data released this week, North Carolina's latest payment error rate of 10.2% would put our state in the highest bracket of a cost share, which would be 15%. So the federal government would pick up 85, the state would pick up 15, requiring our state to pay a staggering $420 million annually under the Senate plan. If North Carolina cannot pay that share, we could be forced to end our SNAP program entirely. The effects would be devastating to more than 1.4 million North Carolinians who stand to lose access to essential food assistance. Moreover, SNAP is also an important economic driver, especially in rural North Carolina. These proposals could jeopardize businesses like rural grocery stores and harm our economic industry or agriculture industry. I found this paragraph to be very interesting. So if North Carolina's share at 15% is $420 million, and there's only 1.4 million, I say only, but 1.4 million North Carolinians on SNAP, which used to be called food stamps. It's now called SNAP. You're telling me that it is costing close to $1.5 billion a year to provide these 1.4 million North Carolinians with food benefits? Doesn't that seem excessive? It's costing over $1.5 billion a year. Reading this statement from Stein, right? The North Carolina 15% share would be $420 million annually. That seems excessively high. Maybe I'm not reading it correctly, but that's what it looks like to me. I found that to be very interesting from the governor. Now on to his final point, dealing with these green energy subsidies and these green energy tax credits. The Senate bill would also have numerous damaging consequences for North Carolina's economy, given our emergence as a top destination for clear energy technology investments and jobs. Since the second quarter of 2022, more than $24 billion in clean energy technology investments have been announced across North Carolina, which already or will soon employ tens of thousands of people in each of the 14 congressional districts in our state. I want to stop there for a second. The clean energy technology sector, clean energy jobs that are constantly talked about and applauded by the left. I think it's important to take a step back and ask this valid question, and I'll go into a little bit of what we talked about yesterday morning. These jobs, if they cannot exist without massive federal subsidies, then they probably shouldn't exist. If an industry cannot hold itself up, if an industry is incapable of sustaining itself without potentially hundreds, if not billions of dollars a year from the federal government in the form of subsidies, tax credits and everything else associated with it, is it not a fair and valid question to ask? Why is that industry existing? Because the federal government doesn't subsidize every single industry that exists. State government doesn't subsidize every single industry that exists. This is when I talk about and bring up the point of winners and losers. When you've got the government, whether it's state or federal, determining that this industry should receive tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars a year, billions of dollars a year worth of economic subsidies, that is the federal government or the state government putting their hand on the scale. That is them deciding what should go forward and what shouldn't. That is not sustainable, and I would argue that is bad in our free market economy in which we live. So the governor is talking about how this clean energy sector is adding all of this profit to North Carolina, but we're subsidizing it. We're paying for it on the front end. If solar panel manufacturers, if wind turbine manufacturers and the companies that are putting solar arrays together and trying to get contracts to put offshore wind off the coast of Brunswick County, if they can't do that without federal government subsidies, then they shouldn't do it at all. Your local mom and pop restaurant does not get federal subsidies. Your local small business does not get federal subsidies to exist. Now, they can get various tax breaks and things that are all in part of the tax code, sure. But they're not getting checks from the federal government. They're not getting massive multi-million or billion-dollar tax credits for operating their business. They're going out there day in and day out, busting their ass to try and make ends meet for themselves, their family, and their employees. They don't get help from the state government. They don't get help from the federal government. And I think it's absurd that we are continuing to subsidize. And this bill is going to pass in the House today. What the Senate did to this in terms of its green energy subsidies, I think, is a freaking disaster. Back to Stein's letter. He says more than 100,000 North Carolinians are already employed in the clean energy sector. Again, all subsidized by the government. Further, both the House and Senate versions of this bill would limit our ability to install cost-effective wind and solar power systems that keep energy prices low and ensure that energy adequacy exists when demand for energy is increasing. Now, you've got to dissect that right there. The House and Senate version of this bill will limit the ability to install quote-unquote cost-effective wind and solar power systems? If they're so cost-effective, as Governor Josh Stein says, if they're so effective, why do they need these subsidies? Why do they need all of these tax and investment credits if they're so cost-effective? It doesn't make any sense. The governor wraps up his letter. Again, this was sent to the entire North Carolina congressional delegation, both Republicans and Democrats. The Senate bill significantly raises taxes on North Carolina's clean energy industry with harmful impacts. It would cost up to 45,000 jobs in our state by 2030. That's 5 years down the line. And decrease the state's GDP by up to $67 billion between the years 2025 and 2034 as clean energy manufacturing and construction projects are canceled or scaled back. On top of that, the removal of tax credits for wind and solar energy will make electricity in North Carolina as much as 18% more expensive, increasing the average family's electrical bill by up to $275 each year. At a time when the demand for electricity to serve new manufacturing, population growth, and data centers is exploding, the Senate's proposal to remove tax credits that support the fastest and cheapest energy generation deployment is untenable. I could not disagree more with the phrasing there from Josh Stein. I could not disagree more with everything that he just said. And he lays out exactly what the issue is. These industries cannot exist without handouts from the federal government. These industries cannot exist without handouts from the state government. Does that not rub you the wrong way completely? It should. Rubs me the wrong way. It rubs me the wrong way that these industries can't sustain themselves. It rubs me the wrong way that these industries are solely reliant on the federal government and or state government to provide them the ability to, exist. That is a major, major problem for me. And it should be a major problem for you. It's obviously not a problem for Josh Stein. It's obviously not an issue for Democrats who, without these major tax credits, people's energy bills are going to go up. Well, maybe we should have thought of that before we decided that the solution going forward for our energy grid. Maybe we should have thought of that before we decided that we were going to go jump 2 feet in to wind and solar energy as a replacement for things like coal, natural gas, and nuclear. Just maybe we should have thought of that. If it was unsustainable, if it's so expensive that you can't afford to do it, you can't afford to operate it without the help of the federal government or a state government. Maybe we should have thought about that, but we didn't, right? Because the issue was never about energy bills. The issue was never about making electricity more affordable for American citizens. This was all about one thing and one thing only: climate change, global warming, sea level rises, CO2 emission, right? These are just wish list items for the Democrats. They've never cared whether solar or wind was affordable. They never cared whether this stuff was sustainable long term, which it's inherently not. I talked about it yesterday morning. When the sun's not shining, solar energy doesn't work super well. When the wind's not blowing, wind turbines don't do incredibly well. Baked right into the kinds of technology that they are. Cool pieces of tech. It's very technologically fascinating that you can lay out a solar panel and generate electricity from the sun. From a technological standpoint, incredibly cool. No, I'm not going to argue that point. But is that really what we want to be reliant on when we get home from work and flip on the lights? When we're getting ready to cook dinner and trying to turn on the stove and, look at that, the power's out. No surprise. Is that what we want to rely on? Is that a sustainable energy future for the United States? The answer is, of course, absolutely not. It's not sustainable. It's not something that makes any sense going forward. But because of all of these tax credits, because of all of these subsidies, clean energy, so-called clean energy, which of course are these solar panels are made with Chinese and third world country labor, places like Indonesia that have 8-year-olds mining lithium and other sorts of raw earth minerals that they can put into their solar panels. Very clean for the environment, of course. Let's finish up the letter from Josh Stein. It says, voices across North Carolina are sounding the alarm. Our hospitals, healthcare providers, county leaders, state leaders, business leaders, workers, nonprofits, and most importantly, the people who rely on these essential services and industries every day. Many North Carolinians are worried about feeding their families, being able to continue seeing their doctors, or keeping their jobs. We are united in our concern that this reconciliation bill would undo decades of bipartisan progress and harm the health, well-being, and economic security of our individuals, families, and communities. I urge you to oppose this bill. Borrowing a line from President Donald Trump, Stein says, "Thank you for your attention to this urgent matter and for your service on behalf of all North Carolinians." Signed, sincerely, Josh Stein, Governor of North Carolina. So that is the bill that was sent to all members of the North Carolina congressional delegation as we continue live this Thursday morning, 12 minutes past 8 o'clock. You're watching and listening to The Nick Craig Show, streaming live on YouTube, Rumble, and X. JD Vance just posting on X literally 4 minutes ago, and says, a GOP congressman just texted me, quote, I was undecided on the bill, but then I watched Hakeem Jeffries' performance, and now I'm a firm yes. So we appear to be inching ever closer to this legislation passing. My goal and my hope here this morning is that this vote is coming up very soon, and we'll be able to bring you that coverage live, as House Speaker Mike Johnson said that the vote could start somewhere between 8 and 8:30 this morning. Well, we are very much in that timetable right now, so we will continue to see what goes on, as Hakeem Jeffries is now going on over 3 hours on the House floor, started shortly before 5 o'clock this morning. He is currently going through a binder, reading, as we heard a couple of times, history lessons over Harry Truman and things of years past, no relation to this legislation at all. And in his own words, continuing to grandstand this process. Let's dip in for a few minutes and hear what the House Minority Leader is saying right now.
Of those tax credits that are designed to provide affordable health care coverage to the American people. Leadership requires courage, conviction, compassion. And yet what we've seen from this administration and its co-conspirators on the Republican side of the aisle, Mr. Speaker, is cruelty, chaos, and corruption. And it's all been morphed into a toxic mix now contained in Donald Trump's one big ugly bill.
They couldn't come up with a better
An
name.
extraordinary assault on the health care of the American people. I mentioned earlier, Mr. Speaker, that taken to the House floor to share stories from the American people. Stories that are too numerous to articulate in the time available to us in connection with debating this bill.
He's been on the floor for 3 hours, by the way.
But I'm going to do my best to make sure that we have a representative sample of why so many Americans all across this country went to bed in fear and are now waking up in horror because Republicans are trying to jam this one big ugly bill down the throats of the American people. An assault on health care, an assault on nutritional assistance, an assault on children, an assault on veterans, an assault on farmers, an assault on everyday Americans. Crystal, who's also from the great state of Alaska.
All right, I'll bear you the sob story here from Hakeem Jeffries, as he's claiming he's got all of these personal letters and all these personal notes about how all of these people are going to be kicked off of their health care coverage and how they're not going to have any chance of getting access to anything of that nature going forward. As you just heard from Hakeem Jeffries, ramming this bill down the throats of the American people. Let's take a step back and look at what's actually going on with this. This piece of legislation has been well discussed now for months. Trump talked about the idea of a big, beautiful bill like days after he was sworn into the Oval Office. The House debated this bill ad nauseum for months. The Senate, yes, made some changes, but not anything substantial to Medicaid and SNAP. That was in the House version originally. So this idea that this bill just magically appeared this week, that prior to, Monday, this legislation didn't exist, that nobody knew anything about it, that it just magically appeared is insane. It's not based in any truth. It's not based in any reality. But it's another attempt by the Speaker or the House Minority Leader, and Hakeem Jeffries, leading the Democrat caucus in the House of Representatives, to try and mislead and gaslight the American people, which is really all that the Democrats are good at. Again, it comes back to the issue at hand, that the Democrats do not have any substantial ideas or policies that are palatable to the American people. The things that they support, men and women's sports, mass illegal migration into the United States, those things are not popular. That's why Hakeem Jeffries is not the House Majority Leader. That is why Democrats don't have a seat at the table in either the House or the Senate. This is their own damn fault for running a terrible candidate at the top of the ticket in Vice President Kamala Harris, who didn't receive a single vote to become the nominee. Was thrown in last second by the Democrats after Joe Biden and his health issues. It was realistic that he was not going to be able to run, that he was not going to be able to sustain a presidential election, let alone 4 more years in the Oval Office. Democrats created this problem themselves. And now they're sounding as they're the boy who cried wolf on the House floor this morning. And this constant notion that they care so much about the American people, that they care so much about the middle class. I don't buy any of it. This is a party that has completely abandoned all normalcies. This is a political party that has given voice to incredibly radical progressives who are burning American cities to the ground, who are chasing Jewish students off of college campuses while they are calling for the destruction of Israel and the promotion of an Iranian-backed terror group known as Hamas operating on the Gaza Strip. That's the Democrat Party. Those are the things that they stand for. Not the middle class, not the poor, not the sick, not the elderly. Make all of these great claims as they attempt to dissuade the American people as to what is actually going on with this legislation. But the reality is, I don't believe for a second that they actually believe a single word out of their mouth. I don't believe for a second that they actually care about those individuals. And I would make the argument that the American people don't believe it either. Hence why they were not given the opportunity. They were not given the power in this election. They were not successful in the presidential election. They were not successful winning majorities back in the House and defeating Republicans in the Senate. They were not capable of doing that. And you have to ask yourself, why? And it's for the issues that I just, the part of it is the issues I just spelled out. Believe that this vote is hopefully happening very soon here this morning. We will grab another quick break this morning as the Nick Craig Show, an extended version, rolls on live this day before the 4th of July, streaming live on YouTube, Rumble, and X, and 24/7 wherever you get your podcasts. We're back right after this. And a good Thursday morning to you once again. Welcome back to our extended edition of the Nick Craig Show, live this morning on YouTube, Rumble, and X, as a big morning happening in Washington, D.C. as we approach 8:30. Debate is continuing. It's not really even debate. It's more grandstanding from Hakeem Jeffries as he continues to going on now almost 4 hours, 3.5 hours of debating the legislation, if you want to call it that, on the floor of the United States House. It started shortly before 5 o'clock this morning, last night in Washington, D.C., and in the overnight hours, Republicans there was expected to be potentially as many as 8 or 9 holdouts on the legislation, apparently due to the work of House Speaker Mike Johnson, as well as President Donald Trump and other allies in Congress. They were able to convince some of those potential holdouts to, in fact, vote in favor of this legislation. It did pass a procedural hurdle shortly after 3 o'clock this morning, and we are awaiting now, presumably, members to make their way back to the Capitol for this vote to begin this morning. The Republicans, just math-wise, can only afford to lose 3 votes in the House on this legislation. Similar setup in the Senate. The big difference is your tie-breaking vote is not cast by the vice president. So 3 is the max number that they can lose. You can presume somebody like Thomas Massey is probably not going to vote for this bill. He's been hardlined against it literally the entire time. So I'm not necessarily sure whether he's going to vote for the legislation or not, but it would appear that the other individuals, some of those other potential holdouts, have at least come in line to what the president and members of Congress, both in the Senate and in the House, want to do with moving forward with this legislation, getting it onto President Donald Trump's desk as soon as the 4th of July. Or President claimed that he wanted to have this piece of legislation signed into law by the 4th of July. And if things go as planned, which we are awaiting this morning, that vote to take place, that is exactly what will happen with this legislation passing the House. And I mentioned yesterday morning kind of the 3 options for this legislation. Option 1, which seemed unlikely yesterday but has seemingly come to fruition, was that the legislation from the Senate is passed by the House and immediately goes to the president's desk. That was option 1. Option 2 was that the House makes some changes to the bill, things like the solar energy tax credits and things of that nature, and it would have to go back to the United States Senate for some concurrence. That was seemed like a real possibility, at least yesterday morning. Passes the House, back to the Senate, they concur, off to the president's desk. And then, of course, the third option was that Republicans do not have enough votes in the House to pass this legislation, and the bill dies in the arms of House Speaker Mike Johnson, and the big, beautiful bill is dead. Those were the 3 options, essentially the 3 options that were available yesterday morning and throughout the day yesterday. It would appear now this morning, at least from some of the overnight reports, again, still a very fluid situation unfolding in Congress, is that in the House rather, is that House Republicans are going to rubber stamp the Senate version of the bill. It will, if that happens, which we are expecting sometime in the 8 o'clock hour this morning, but you know how this stuff rolls out of Congress, especially with timelines and things. It would move out of the House, immediately go to the president's desk, and you would imagine he would either sign it sometime later today or maybe do something big tomorrow on the 4th of July. So that is essentially where we stand this morning as more and more members of the House make their way onto the floor. Hakeem Jeffries still debating the legislation. Now we're getting a standing ovation from his Democrat colleagues. Let's dip in and see what the House Minority Leader is talking about.
Extraordinary assault that has been launched against the American people by Donald Trump and complete Republican control.
Yes, that's true. We do have complete Republican control.
Let's understand who is doing you in.
Okay, Hakeem, lay it on us.
People on the other side of the aisle It's not too late. All we need are 4 Republicans to join us to show John McCain levels of courage.
Oh,
Not
man.
on the battlefield,
All right,
as he did.
I got to stop this. John McCain levels of courage. This is what I hate more than anything else about the Democrat Party. These people despised John McCain. When he ran against Barack Obama in 2008, they said some of the most hateful, vitriolic, terrible, awful things about John McCain when he was running against their Lord and Savior, Barack Hussein Obama. But now that he ended up screwing over the GOP with casting the vote against repealing Obamacare, and now that he's dead, now he's the savior of the left. These people have absolutely no class and absolutely no shame. The courage of John McCain, they called him a racist for running against Barack Obama. But now John McCain levels of courage. Go pound sand, Hakeem Jeffries. Go pound sand. What a scumbag.
And then in one of his final acts of courage, he pushed back against the effort to rip away health care.
Still on John McCain. Okay, great.
From millions of Americans.
Yeah, he ran against.
All we need is 4 Republicans to show John McCain levels of courage when it comes to protecting the health, the safety, and the well-being of the American people, protecting the nutritional assistance of the American people. I think earlier today, I may have neglected to mention the leadership of Jim McGovern, who's done an extraordinary job leading the charge on the Rules Committee as we've pushed back against this all-out assault on the American people. Hour after hour after hour after hour, Jim McGovern, the members of the Rules Committee, and so many members of the House Democratic Caucus pushing amendment after amendment, debating hard against this one big ugly bill on behalf of the American people. Jim McGovern, of course, longtime champion for combating hunger in the United States of America. So thankful for Jim's resilience and his strength, even in the face of great tragedy. Continues to battle hard on behalf of the American people. Julie writes, SNAP has been an amazing help to my family. Very grateful to receive it. I'm a single mom of twin 13-year-old girls. I've been on my own with my girls since they were 1 and have never received child support. I do work. People who receive Medicaid work. People who receive SNAP work. So some people in this town need to stop lying to the American people. Mr. Speaker, I said some people in this town need to stop lying to the American people. Julie said, I do work. But don't make enough money to cover all my expenses. It's a big misunderstanding that people on SNAP don't have jobs. My children would eat very poorly if I didn't have SNAP.
By the way, as Hakeem Jeffries talks about Medicaid and the limit, in North Carolina, for you to be eligible for Medicaid, you need to make less than $1,300 a month. So you're talking about somebody making less than $15,000 a year. That is the threshold to be eligible for Medicaid. Just laying that out there, as there's this fear that you've got these people working, making $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year that are going to have their health care ripped away under Medicare. Or Medicaid, excuse me. It's not true. Regular Medicaid is $1,300 a year. That is the or $1,300 a month. That is the limit here in North Carolina. I think that's rather important to bring forward.
Mark says, I've collected Medicaid and SNAP benefits for over a decade now. I may well have found myself in a worse place if not for these programs. Giving freely and charitably is the way of Jesus.
But correct, this gentleman that he's talking about, having received these benefits for over a decade, is not going to be affected by the changes to Medicaid, because these are just for the individuals that joined it under expansion. But again, facts and stuff are hard.
That's someone who's talking like a Matthew 25 and 35 Christian. SNAP and Social Security benefits have been life-saving for me. They literally keep me alive. I suffer from severe depression, anxiety, OCD, and have Asperger's. This is why I'm on Social Security and SNAP. I believe that everyone should have access to these benefits. And in an ideal world, our communities would be centered around love, harmony.
I'm sorry. I mean, without sounding like a cruel-hearted person, our communities need to be centered on love. Well, because of your OCD, your Asperger's, and your ADHD, somebody has to pay for that. I mean, that's the reality, and this is what seemingly is lost on the left. Somebody has to pay for this stuff. Somebody's got to fund this bill. Somebody has got to pay for the SNAP and the Medicaid and the various services that you're on. Whether you like it or not, whether you think it's a good idea or not, oh yeah, we're going to have a community centered around love. Great. Who's going to pay for the love? Somebody's still going to have to pay for these benefits. And the reality is, and the issue that the left struggles with, is that eventually you run out of other people's money. I mean, that's why socialism has not and will never work. Because you do, in fact, eventually run out of other people's money. It is not sustainable forever. It just isn't. So, you can listen to all of these heart-wrenching stories from Hakeem Jeffries. But the reality is somebody has to fund it. And the United States is broke. It's almost $37 trillion in debt. Let's hear more from the great House Minority Leader, Hakeem Jeffries.
How was it that a few hours ago, several of my Republican colleagues had principled opposition to Donald Trump's one big, ugly bill? Several hours ago, how is it that so many of our Republican colleagues, Mr. Speaker, had principled opposition to Donald Trump's one big ugly bill, either because of the devastating assault on Medicaid, health care, supplemental nutritional assistance, assault on veterans, assault on clean energy jobs, assault on the cost of living, which
Assault on the
is
cost of
represented
living.
in this bill,
What does that even mean?
because of the assault on the fiscal irresponsibility of a bill that will explode the deficit, increase the debt by trillions of dollars, send us on a death spiral potentially as it relates to our economy. How is it, Mr. Speaker, that so many of our colleagues on the other side of the aisle had principled opposition just a few hours ago and now seem prepared to fold on the floor of the House of Representatives? Don't you have some responsibility, Mr. Speaker, to say to the American people what happened? What deals were cut? What occurred in the back room? It will all come out.
I'm sure it will, Hakeem.
One way or the other, Mr. Speaker. Incredible to me that this Congress is on the verge of ripping food out of the mouths of children,
Oh, my Lord.
veterans, and seniors as a result of this one big ugly bill in order to reward billionaires with massive tax breaks and exploding the debt in the process. I mentioned earlier in my remarks that as House Democrats, we envision a different country than the one that is being ravaged by such extremism right now. Imagine a country where every single American can afford to live the good life. Good paying job, good housing, good health care, good education for your children, and a good retirement. Work hard, play by the rules, live the good life. That's the America that we should be working hard right now to bring about for every single American. But we know there are far too many Americans in this country struggling to live paycheck to paycheck. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That should not be the case in this great country. The wealthiest country in the history of the world, a country that has become far too expensive for far too many people. Donald Trump promised to lower the high cost of living on day one. He made that promise to the American people. Made that promise, hadn't happened on day one, hasn't happened on month 1, month 2, month 3, month 4, month 5, month 6. It's not happening. Mr. Speaker, costs aren't going down. Costs are going up in the United States of America. Life is becoming more expensive. And it seems to me that in this great country, this Congress should be working hard to build an affordable economy for hardworking American taxpayers. That's our plan. That's our vision. That's our goal as House Democrats, an affordable economy for hardworking American taxpayers.
How's that working out?
But Donald Trump's one big ugly bill will make life more expensive for the American people. Lynette wrote to us. She's also a resident of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. She said, I'm a single mom of 3 girls. Although my 2 older girls are out of the home, they and I struggle. I work full time, but it's not enough to get by. Without the help of SNAP and Section 8, I would not be able to afford anything. I sacrifice every day so my daughters can have food and a place to come home and call home. I get $124 a month in food stamps. $124 a month in food stamps, which isn't enough as food prices keep going up. With the little help I do get from the government, I am grateful and blessed. Last year, I passed out after a church service and was rushed to the hospital. I didn't have any insurance at this time, but I was treated. However, I could not pay back the services that I received, and I still need treatments. I have been choosing to pay for rent and food, but I have these bills and other appointments that I need to go to but don't have the extra money, and I don't qualify for Medicare, don't make enough to get insurance on the marketplace for insurance. Lynette, without the help of SNAP and Section 8, I would not be able to afford anything. Mr. Speaker, Lynette resides in Pennsylvania's 7th congressional district, a district represented by our colleague, Congressman Ryan McKenzie. Wendy writes to us from the Commonwealth of Virginia. Says that I am a single mother of 2.
All right. Well, that's been now 4 hours of Hakeem Jeffries, as he well described very early this morning. He was going to take his slow time to go through all of these stories. We were expecting votes sometime in the 8 o'clock hour this morning on the big, beautiful bill. Not exactly sure when that's happening. Trying to keep up to date with what's going on. I'm not really seeing any movement as to when exactly that vote is scheduled to happen. We were told last night by House Speaker Mike Johnson that it should have happened around 8:30 or so. Very possible that members are still making their way back to the United States House after what has been a very long couple of nights and days between not only the House and the Senate. So with that, we continue to watch that go on. Do want to turn to something relevant here in southeastern North Carolina here just for a moment while we wait. We'll give it till about 9 o'clock or so and see if a vote moves forward. There is the risk of some tropical weather as we are now very much well within the hurricane season across southeastern North Carolina, and we do have the risk, looking at the latest from the National Hurricane Center, does appear that there is an area that is set that could potentially form off of the North Carolina coast over the next couple of days that could bring some tropical weather into the early parts of next week. That announcement just coming in from the National Hurricane Center moments ago, 60% chance, not expecting any sort of major tropical storm or any major tropical weather, but there very well could be some uncertainty in the forecast for early next week with some low-grade tropical system forming off of the Carolina coast. It's set to move itself off of Texas or off of Florida, over the weekend and punch out into the Atlantic Ocean with those really warm ocean temperatures in the early parts of July here could allow some of the formation of that. So that is something that we are going to be keeping an eye on throughout the weekend and into the earlier parts of next week as we are now very well within the hurricane season, which runs all the way until the end of November. One of the things that we'll be keeping you up to date on here on the Nick Craig Show as we head into our first hurricane season together is a very close eye on the tropics. Obviously, a huge impact across the state of North Carolina. Have dealt with some pretty major storms here over the last couple of years. We'll keep a very close eye on that. Again, where are we standing this morning in a procedural vote last night? Members of the House members of the United States House did in fact pass a procedural vote to move forward with Trump's big, beautiful bill as we approach 9 o'clock this morning here on the Nick Craig Show on a Thursday morning, right ahead of the July 4th holiday weekend. That procedural vote is something that was a huge win, and we'll see obviously what comes up here later on this morning, but a huge win for House Speaker Mike Johnson, House Majority Leader Steve Scalise, and of course Senate Majority Leader John Thune, the Speaker of the Senate, who was successful in getting this bill passed earlier in the week out of the United States Senate, now making its way back to the House where voting took place throughout the vast majority of the day yesterday. Democrats continue to slow walk the process on the House floor. The inevitable seems to be pretty obvious this morning that this bill is going to pass. All of the information that we've received overnight, some potential discussions of holdouts not voting in favor of this legislation seems to be pretty quelled this morning, and that is why starting shortly before 5 o'clock, Hakeem Jeffries made his way to the floor of the United States House. He claimed himself that he was going to be slow walking this process, and that is exactly what he has been doing for the better part of going on 4 hours now, or actually at this point over 4 hours, when he began this process around 4:50 early this morning ahead of what is expected to be a vote that will send the big, beautiful bill to President Donald Trump's desk. Have not seen an update in probably over the last 20 minutes as to what exactly is happening in the House, why Republicans have not necessarily made their way to the floor for a vote. It's possible that some members that had given the nod last night that they would be in favor of this legislation, there is a possibility that maybe some of them are having, I should describe it as maybe cold feet this morning on this legislation. So there may still be some more work to be done for President Trump, House Leader Mike Johnson, Majority Whip Steve Scalise, as they may be in the process right now of trying to make sure and confirm that they've got all of their votes. They can only afford to lose 3. If they lose a 4th vote on the Republican side, the bill is dead. So there's a lot of course, calculations and a lot of math going on to make sure that all of their votes are solid before you're likely to hear from House Speaker Mike Johnson making his way to the floor. It's not immediately clear if he's on the floor or not. He was very early this morning in the 3 o'clock hour. He will at some point make his way back to the House floor, and they will likely go through this process presumably pretty quickly as the vote itself, if all of the votes are in line and everybody is kind of on board with it, that's the process that will unfold. So we continue to wait and watch for that process this morning as Just trying to keep an eye on what's going on in terms of any updates as to when exactly that is slated to take place. Not immediately clear. We'll give it a few more minutes with Hakeem Jeffries and wrap up the show here if we don't see any significant movement as he continues to grandstand. His words, not mine, grandstand on the floor of the United States House.
We're kind of holding our breath for this fall. That's when it will hurt the most farmers. We need trade with Mexico and Canada too. That's why I think the reciprocal tariffs are going to hurt us more. We get fertilizer from Canada. We get parts and products made in Mexico. As House Democrats, we're focused on creating more good-paying jobs, on economic strategies that make sense, that are designed to lift up the American people. But I can't find anything in this 900-plus page bill that is actually designed to permanently sustain a positive trajectory for farmers in this country and for everyday Americans. In fact, the chaotic uncertainty of the economic policies that have been unleashed by the Trump administration and complete Republican rule in Washington, D.C., will have devastating consequences for the American people and for farmers like April. John writes to us from the great state of North Carolina.
Oh, let's hear this guy. Okay.
He says to us, not many families can say this, black families, that is, but we've been here for over 100 years. My great-grandfather, my grandfather on both sides, and my father were all farmers. Honestly, I cannot understand it. I have not heard anybody from that administration that could tell me anything that makes any sense of what he's causing. John further writes, you cannot take a chainsaw and do surgery. I'm going to plant about 50% less than I would normally because I don't know what the price is going to be. I don't want to take the risk of putting even more out there. What we've seen from the Trump administration, from this so-called DOGE effort, and from our Republican colleagues, Mr. Speaker, is deeply troubling. Republicans are trying to take a chainsaw to Social Security, a chainsaw to Medicare, a chainsaw to Medicaid, a chainsaw to the health care of the American people, a chainsaw to nutritional assistance for hungry children, a chainsaw to farm country, and a chainsaw to vulnerable Americans. But as House Democrats, we're here to make clear, Mr. Speaker, we're determined to take a chainsaw to Project 2025. A chainsaw, a chainsaw, a chainsaw to Project 2025.
A chainsaw? Is that what he's talking about?
People.
So we're not even talking about the big, beautiful bill anymore. We're going over the same sorry old tactics from the election for Democrats. Project 2025 and Social Security is going away and Medicare is going away and all of these federal programs are just going away because of big, awful, terrible Donald J. Trump. None of it is based in any reality. None of it is based in any fact. It is the only thing that Democrats have to try and win sympathy with the American voting bloc. It's the only thing that Democrats have to try and win favor with their voters. It hasn't worked. Sure as hell didn't work in November of last year. It didn't work through the entire 2024 election cycle. But that's the same thing that they're going back to now. What's Hakeem saying now? Let's see. No more reading from him.
That has been written by Republicans as it relates to this one big ugly bill. Correspondence that I'm struggling to understand now, because it appears that almost every single House Republican is prepared to recklessly rubber stamp Donald Trump's extreme agenda and sign off on this one big ugly bill. So I'm going to go through some of the correspondence momentarily that maybe at some point our Republican colleagues can help us figure out. But I want to enter into the record one last story from a farmer. Can we respect the farmers in the United States of America? Can we respect them? We began this country as an agrarian economy. We should respect the farmers in this country as I'm telling their stories. On the eve of our 249th birthday, can we respect the farmers in this country who we're working hard to defend?
Ah, yes, the Democrats. Always working hard to defend everybody, right?
Susie is from Missouri.
All right. Well, I think we've seen enough. It appears that the vote has at least been a little bit stalled or delayed as it stands right now in the United States House. That vote is expected to happen hopefully within the next couple of hours. And the big, beautiful bill, as everything has played out in the overnight hours, is expected to pass. And then, of course, will make its way over to President Donald Trump's desk if the House is doing what they are expected to do, which is sign off on the Senate version that passed earlier this week. And from that point, that vote would go directly to the president's desk and for likely a bill signing ceremony either sometime later today or potentially tomorrow on July the 4th. Not immediately clear when the president would sign that legislation, but it's obviously something that we will keep a very close eye on. Well, thanks for joining us this morning on this extended edition of the Nick Craig Show as we watch the big, beautiful bill debate. Have a great 4th of July weekend. I'm off tomorrow, but we'll be back here Monday morning, 7 a.m., streaming live on YouTube, Rumble, and X, and 24/7 wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks to the Law Group for their continued support. Visit them online at lawgroupnc.com or give them a call, 910-251-6088. Have a great 4th of July weekend.